What's going on, everybody? This is James Grandmaster Facts Boyce, and you're here for another Facts Project episode. Thank you for being here. We are here today to talk with Joe Illidge to talk about Bloodletter for the Spawn Universe. Thank you for joining me today, sir.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Absolutely. So to get right into it, and I took the notation to put this particular book right here. It just has one of yours. So this is the 2021 Access Guide for Black Comic Book Community that I just haven't had. It's a directory for the who's who within Black comics that this man right here on the screen just so happened to be a part of with Joseph Carmona. Oh man, look, now this was one of those predominantly comic book driven projects that I felt as though I needed to insert myself into the comic book realm. So I wanted to get that off my chest first off. Thank you for that.
Okay, great. And I appreciate you getting that. That was really a labor of love that, my friend Demetrios Fragiskatos, who owns Anyone Comics, which is one of my two local retailers, he DM'd me one day on Facebook and said, "What do you think about a green book for the comic book industry?" And if we know what the Green Book is, the Green Book was the book by which Black motorists were able to navigate throughout the United States by car in light of Jim Crow laws. So it's like, which places are safe for you, which places are not safe for you. And thinking about that in the comic book industry, the idea that the entire industry isn't necessarily safe for Black people.
It's true.
And to be able to provide a guide, not only for the people who are in the industry, but really for all the people outside who see Black Panther, right, and know that there's more, but they don't know how to connect to the more. They may not even know that there are many comic book stores outside of their local comic book shop, right? So being able to create this with Demetrios and the third member of the team, George Carmona, who's a journalist and a designer, he designed the book, did quite a bit of the research to be able to create that gateway for people, their friends, their family, their kids, right? And show them just this wide array of Black creators and the publishers, whether they're Black owned or corporate owned, that are hiring Black creators at all levels. And so what you have there is the second volume. Without any spoilers, I will say that that may not necessarily be the last volume
I was hoping
that you see, right? So, once you start something, it develops a certain kind of momentum, and then you have a responsibility. But the reality is these things take time, right? And so with everything that I'm doing, including Bloodletter, it's really like you have to fit everything in. You're spinning all these plates. You don't want any one of them to drop off the sticks. So you just have to be able to maintain balance of everything. So there is more going on with that, but I'm happy to see that, and thank you very much.
Absolutely. So I couldn't help but, of course, to look behind you. And of course, I'm seeing all those Spawn Compendium volumes behind you. And of course, we're talking about the Guinness Book World Record longest uninterrupted series in Spawn. Doesn't stop at a number, does not get retconned. If we want to talk about independent comics as relatable as they are to manga, you have one creator doing one singular series all the way through. No retcons, no other authors or whatsoever, unless there is a spinoff, which you happen to have.
Yes. And it's really interesting. So, when Tim Seeley, my co-writer, and I got the job to write Bloodletter, in any given assignment, the first thing you have to do is your research. Now, I was there for the emergence of Image Comics. I remember buying Spawn #1, Wildcats #1, Youngblood #1, right?
Yeah.
And I was even there for what is the pre-birth of Image, which was Todd McFarlane Spider-Man, Jim Lee X-Men, Rob Liefeld New Mutants, which became Rob Liefeld X-Force. So being there for the emergence of Image Comics and just what that meant, that was a pretty amazing time. Like the the early 90s in comics were absolutely explosive and industry changing. Now let's talk about Spawn, right? Spawn's basically the EGOT of comics, right? Because Spawn, in a relatively short amount of time, the comic book, the HBO animated series,
the toys,
the toy line, the live action film with Michael Jai White, right? For all of those. And I think that was in less than 6 years.
That's true.
Okay. And again, to your point, Spawn is in the Guinness Book of World Records. Uninterrupted series coming out every month, never reverse the numbering to go back to one to get that sales bump from retailers, right? Just kept it going. So those compendiums are really a testament to that. And I really had to immerse myself into the Spawn universe because it was a universe that I would go in and out of, right? It would sometimes be based upon who's doing the artwork or if I hear about a very particular storyline. And what was very distinctive about Todd McFarlane's approach is it took him a long time to get to the Spawn universe.
Oh, yeah.
Right? All these characters were basically coming out through the Spawn title with rare exception. And then it was a few years ago that it was the Spawn Universe announcement launch. And I remember that day like it was yesterday because I have a lot of friends in the industry.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of them are artists. And a lot of them had been keeping basically off radar for a year. And when the Spawn Universe announcement came up, then they all revealed, I'm doing this book, I'm doing that book, I'm doing that book. And I was like, wow, the master planning and like the Marvel Studios level security that Todd McFarlane had going on for Spawn Universe was pretty amazing. So to be able to write in it, right, that's like, okay, first of all, it's fun. And second of all, it's a serious responsibility and you got to take it that way. And so that's what Bloodletter is. It is a spin-off of the Spawn universe. And we're really having a lot of fun with it and introducing this new character, Tasha Thornwall, to the readers.
Yeah, and when we're talking about like the new series that basically are an expansion of this universe, and the spinoffs that you're bringing up, Rat City, Sam and Twitch, the Gunslinger series that was already pretty much out, the Misery series, the Book of Nyx, your series. So it's like Todd shows up at New York Comic Con every single year, and it's usually like a big deal because he's always has something that he pretty much has in his bag that he's going to throw out there. So this past year, it was like, all right, everybody's going to surface on one particular area to hear exactly what he has to put out. And obviously, the Spawn fans are a cult following. They go and they march to the beat of Todd and how this universe is basically built. They've probably been there since day one. They're following the entire universe to the T. They know exactly how it's going to be. They buy everything. That's just how they roll. But
that's it.
For you to jump on this, like, how did that? First off, how did the pitch go, and how did this opportunity just come about?
So that's a great question. So I'm gonna preface it by saying this: somewhere in my basement, in addition to probably the first 10 issues of Spawn, are a Spawn Generation 1 action figure and an Al Simmons CIA Generation 1 action figure.
Gotcha.
Right? Okay. So I am a big spy genre nut. And the fact that the Spawn universe was this combination of spy and mysticism, I loved it. Right? Okay. So Tim Seeley, my co-writer, and I, we go back to, we worked at Heavy Metal Magazine together. We were both there as the top editors at Heavy Metal Magazine. And when you're talking heavy metal, you're talking about horror and science fiction and fantasy and these different things. You're actually talking about the genre mashup that you do see in Spawn, right? Spawn is like horror, science fiction, and fantasy all mashed together in this insane orgy that is his vast universe. And so I connected with Thomas Healy, who's the editor-in-chief of Todd McFarlane Productions. And, I said, hey, Tim and I, we're working together on some things. would love to know if we could show you something. What are you looking for? So whenever I'm talking to an editor or an editor-in-chief and I pitch a story to them, I say, what are you looking for? So I ask, what does the Spawn universe need that
Right.
it doesn't already have?
Mm-hmm.
And he really opened the door for us. And so when we pitched Bloodletter, it was a strong enough pitch that he then arranged a 1 hour Zoom call with Todd McFarlane.
Mm.
Now, you got to know how surreal that is.
Yeah.
Okay. Because Todd McFarlane, when you say he's a comic book deity, you're just scratching the surface. Todd McFarlane is an entrepreneur with
Oh,
an empire,
yeah.
okay? And the comic books are the nucleus of it, but you're talking about the toy empire. You're talking about just as a collector, as an entrepreneur, as an investor. And so I have watched a number of interviews with him talking about his origins and what he's learned along the way. Because that's another thing. I'm a business junkie, right? As
Mm-hmm.
an entrepreneur myself, I love the dynamics of business and what I can learn from really successful people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so when we got to talk to Todd for an hour, he really laid out the psychology of the Spawn universe, the
Yeah.
mythology, what are the rules, Spawn himself. He talked about the motivations of other characters. And then it became really clear. It was actually within that conversation that we got the final piece we needed to really craft Bloodletter. So
Right.
when we came through with the final draft, it was like, okay, approved, you're off to the races, right? So that was how the beginning happened.
Yeah.
And at that time, we didn't have the artist yet. We didn't have the art team yet. So Tim and I were writing with our idea of who Tasha Thornwall was,
Right.
right? But that was from a writer standpoint, an intellectual and emotional standpoint. We didn't quite yet have the visualization. We had some ideas of the real world, who would be an inspiration, right? You gotta have Grace Jones in there, right?
Yeah.
You gotta think about Gugu Mbatha Raw. You gotta think about Janelle Monáe, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to think about Black woman excellence
Mm-hmm.
in our world, right?
Yep.
And so then once Christian Rosado, the artist, came on board and he and I worked together in the heavy metal days, then that was it. He sent the character designs, and sometimes character designs have to go through multiple iterations. He nailed it on the first shot.
Oh,
When we first saw Tasha visualize, we were like, okay, let's go. Now it's complete. So it was Christian Rosado, the artist, and then the colorist DC Alonso. And so when you have a great team, you're going off the momentum of that creative energy and just being inspired by what other people are doing in your team, right?
yeah. Like now to piggyback off of that, the construction of Tasha Thornwall, uh, Haitian, South American.
Yes. Yes.
I'm going to guess there's going to be a whole dibble dabble of Creole pitter patter throughout this entire book.
I'll tell you this. So this is what I will say to you. We will have Creole in issue 1, but it'll be English in brackets. In issue 4, it will be Creole.
Mm.
And for a very particular reason, which you will see once you get to Bloodletter 4. But that is going to be very particular, right? And that's important to me. I actually live in a Haitian neighborhood here in Brooklyn, New York. I'm in Flatbush.
Okay.
And Flatbush is predominantly Haitian, I think. And so to make her part Haitian, and then I think it was Tim's idea to bring in South Americans. We were like, okay, that's going to be a really great mix. That helped inform me as to who Tasha is, who her parents are, maybe what was her childhood like. I could tell you she was born in Brooklyn. That I can tell you.
Perfect.
Oh yeah, listen, to some degree, use the circumstances of your life to
Yep.
bring some authenticity to the character, right? And as we know, Black is by no means monolithic. Black is infinitely varied. And as soon as I say that she's part Haitian, you're talking about a different experience than the Black American experience, right?
Yeah.
Than the Black Southern American experience,
Yeah.
right? We're talking these different layers. And so having her be that, giving her some kind of exotic quality, we thought that that was really necessary to make her, first of all, pretty varied as a character.
Yeah.
And her Haitian heritage is going to factor significantly into a flashback sequence in Bloodletter 1. But also, the characters of the Spawn universe are all very exotic and mysterious and
Very.
dangerous in their all way, right? So, Bloodletter has to stand alongside all of them. Like if you had a visual where you put all the Spawn characters in a line,
Mm-hmm.
Bloodletter's got to hang with them. Bloodletter can't be the dip,
Right.
right? You have to be able to keep going and saying, okay, she can stand next to She Spawn. She can stand next to Redeemer.
Mm-hmm.
She can stand next to Spawn himself, right? And so we thought about different ideas about her look,
Yeah.
how her look represents her story, because character design is story. What does her look tell you about her abilities, the life that she's led, and her fashion sense?
Yeah. Because
What does that tell you,
I
right?
one thing that was very distinctive
Yeah.
is the tattoos.
Oh yeah.
And I for one, I'm wondering to myself, okay, Haitian, South American, Creole,
Mm-hmm.
are the tattoos protection spells?
100%. In part, in part, they are protection spells. In part, they're gateways,
Mm,
right, to power. And, part of the reason she's called Bloodletter is she needs to utilize her own blood to create the magic that she creates. So those tattoos on her, those aren't henna tattoos. Those are
right,
permanent tattoos,
right.
like in her skin, that are scorched or cut or what have you. So, magic in part is about cause and effect. It's a higher, to call it a higher level of science is even a misnomer, but it operates by the same cause and effect rules at the very least. And so she needs to give of herself to access higher power. And the giving of herself is through a method that necessitates a high pain threshold,
Mm,
right? So
right.
think about that as well, right? When you're
Yeah.
talking about what you have to give to get, you can't just get access to magic. And she's been running around in the shadows for 10 years. She's
Right.
come across some pretty mean characters of the metaphysical level. And so she's had to learn how to be able to protect herself,
Mm,
because otherwise, like any mystical being is just going to be throwing her all over the place.
right.
She needs to be able to take it to some degree. So she's been building this library
Yeah.
of protective spells and gateways to magic. Her body is literally the journal.
So even I guess in the ways that she's constructed in order for her ways to protect herself, and of course, the ability to fight through her struggles. The
Yes.
ultimate benefactor for this entire book is revenge.
So yes, in the beginning,
Yes.
right?
Okay.
But there's also a factor, right, which is once you read Bloodletter 1, you'll know about the conflict between her and Al Simmons, like the what, where, when, and why,
Right.
right? And Bloodletter's a revenge story, but when you're dealing with revenge, usually you're also dealing with grief.
Yeah.
And grief as a whole that can be bottomless.
Right.
And so part of what Tasha Thornwall has been trying to do with her life is fill the hole.
Okay, like almost as an act of closure.
Exactly. It's great that you say that, because as human beings, I feel like closure is something that we all want, but we usually don't get.
Yeah.
So we have to create closure for ourselves. And when you have to do it that way, it can be really messy. And closure leaves emotional scars, psychological scars, and in her case, literal physical scars. Right? You see?
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah, like and even as far as like so I'm collected as her being a former CIA operative, almost in the same essence as Al Simmons.
Yes.
And ultimately she was outed by him. Al, from what we know, regardless of how people feel about him before he became Spawn, covert, probably a prick. As far as like
100%.
the things that he did to actually complete missions probably rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, which is more so essential to the fact that when he finally did meet the afterlife, he went straight to hell.
Not only did he go to hell, he was chosen
to go there.
He was so exceptional at his ruthlessness and his capacity for murder that he was chosen to be of the Legion of Hellspawn. So to your point, that tells you what kind of dude we were dealing with. And when you go to that, you're dealing with a particular psychology. I remember years ago when I first saw the first Equalizer film with Denzel Washington, directed by Antoine Fuqua.
Yeah.
And I wrote a column on it when I used to write for a website called Comic Book Resources. And I wrote about, why is this guy so ruthless and methodical and brutal with what he does? Because we've been given a diet in which murder is like ballet, right? Even when you watch the Bourne movies, and that's really mixing it up. They're bringing in different kinds of martial arts and the idea that anything in your vicinity is a potential weapon. They're bringing in Krav Maga, right?
Yeah.
But even Bourne fights are very choreographed, right? Whereas the way Denzel's Equalizer was, it was brutal and efficient. And what occurred to me is, he's a black man in covert intelligence. He couldn't just be good at his job. He had to be exceptional. And to be exceptional in a job like that required brutality, right? Now, let's take it to Al Simmons. Al Simmons, who basically was the face of death in the intelligence circles of the Spawn universe, right?
Yeah.
That's a guy who, he has no ethics when it comes to the job. He's a man of method and completion. So he has left thousands of bodies behind him on the various worldwide missions he's done. Now, what we don't usually see is what happens after he's gone. And the story of Tasha Thornwall originates in that.
Gotcha.
What happens once you leave? What have you wrought? Right? And the outing of her, which has a very specific reason, which you'll find out, that really just changes the entire direction of her life. And here we are 10 years later, right? And everything that Al Simmons has been through and everything that she has been through, and it comes back to the here and now.
Wow. Now, also in that effect, we just talked about how badass Al Simmons as a character was even before he was spawned.
Yes,
What
indeed.
would basically make Tasha want to actually like go up against this, even in the realm of knowing that he is a hellspawn?
Listen, it's a great question, right? Because logically, once you find out he's Spawn, you want no part of it.
Right.
You want no part of it, right? But there's a few things we're going to take into consideration. Number one is Tasha's a mystic, right? So she knows that she has the capability to fight fire with fire, right? Does her fire burn brighter than his? To be determined, but she knows she has the fire. The next thing is she's basically been living underground in the shadows, off grid for a third of her life because of what Al Simmons did. So him in the here and now as Spawn, she does not care that he's Spawn. She's like, I'm not good until I do you.
Right.
I can't close the circle until I do you. And that's it. So we're going beyond logic now. We're going to the filling of the hole.
Right.
Right? The hole that she's been trying to fill, hasn't successfully done it, and she feels like now she can really do it. Right? Whether that's true or not is to be determined. Whether that's how her grief works, to be determined. But when you're talking like revenge for real, you're not operating from the logic of boundaries or even the logic of what's the likelihood I get out of this alive. That's irrelevant. What you're going to do is you're going to take the steps to reduce your chance of failure to hair thin.
Right.
Right. And what you're going to see in this series is you're going to see the preparation.
Right. Because the best revenge, I guess you would say, is more so calculated. Generally, when you see somebody that has been done wrong and they act, I guess, inappropriately, it's met with rage. And usually with those rage, you make mistakes.
That's right.
So
that's right.
I can imagine if you waited this long and you have a full decade to prepare, obviously, probably before she became who she is right now, there was no tattoos. Possibly, well, maybe.
No, you're right.
Maybe no.
There was none of that.
They were like,
right?
You know what? Yeah, it's like me sitting in the dark in these shadows, knowing that the supernatural is real. And in order for me to go up against it, I feel as though I have to prepare myself for what is out there. Maybe not even knowing the fact that Spawn is actually even out there. But yet, if so happens, I come into contact with Al Simmons one more again, he's going to know what he's dealing with.
That's it. And it's part of what happens is you have a worldview. You think that you have a total understanding of how things work, especially since she was a CIA agent. So she has seen things that you and I will never see. And then she's opened up to the much wider world, right? So the day she comes across her first mystical entity, that's a bad one because she is in no way equipped for it, right? Will we get to tell that story? Let's see. But I already know what that day was like for her, and it was very bad, okay? When you find out that your understanding of the world is quite incomplete, okay? So that is it, right? It is when you've been hurt, our natural human response is when we've been hurt deeply, we try to turn ourselves into a version of ourselves that can't be hurt like that again.
Right.
So her journey through this world is an attempt to become invulnerable. Yeah. That's at the core of the human experience, right?
Yeah.
Not only on an emotional level, and we all go through this because no one wants to be hurt the same way twice.
Yeah.
Right? Not in love, not in physical pain, not in a basketball game, nothing. But also, it's the way the human body works. muscles get traumatized, they get torn, they stitch back together, and they're stronger. When we work out, when we're in the gym, we are literally wrecking ourselves.
Yeah.
But when we come back, it stitches itself back while we sleep. We're stronger and we see a reward. And we're like, you know what? I want to feel that way again.
Definitely.
And then we go back and we tear our muscles again so they can become stronger again. So it's part of the natural human instinct.
And I guess even in some of those human instincts, you kind of fall in line with people that you necessarily wouldn't perceive yourself to be with, when possibly before you got into these struggles. So am I to say that Tasha is going to basically align herself in these 10 years to where she's sat in the darkness with somewhat of the supernatural, or better yet, the occult, being how she's getting in touch with possibly like her Haitian roots?
Yes, 100%. Because she's been dealing with a hierarchy that was government defined.
Yeah.
So she was in a world in which she gave herself over to a higher purpose,
Yeah.
defined by the government and by the military. And when those institutions failed to save her from the event that is going to throw her life into a tailspin, when she has no more faith in those, then she only has faith in herself, which means that her personal ethics are going to change.
Oh man.
Right? And once that happens, and then you're out in the world, then you realize, listen, my code before is obsolete. I need to build a new code day by day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to require some alliances with some messy people.
Yeah.
If I've got to survive messier people, and that goes to demonic forces and things like that. If you look at a character like Doctor Strange is actually asking a pantheon of mystical deities for permission to be a gateway to power, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not all of them have to say yes.
Right.
And so if you're talking about where Tasha's coming in, Tasha's coming across some mystical beings and they don't have a code. And their opinion of us is our opinion of insects. Okay? So you see, it's an entirely different ecosystem
Mm-hmm.
for her. And she has had to make up the rules as she goes along.
And it's almost in the same contrast that Spawn went up against Malebolgia with.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that, like, there is no rules here.
Exactly.
I'm going to give you
Exactly.
missions, however they're meant to be done. The same way that you handled things on Earth is how it's going to happen down here.
And you see what Spawn did, right? Spawn went from being one of the kind of like sentries
Mm-hmm.
to actually being the ruler.
Yeah.
But look at the journey it took for him to do that. Part of the reason that he was able to do that is because he was a spy.
Right.
And so he's a lateral thinker. And he was able to figure out the psychology of his enemies, the landscape. But his journey was a long one. The journey from Spawn number 1 to
Yeah.
Spawn 300 is a long journey,
It is.
right? Right? But that's an earned journey, right?
Yeah.
And so that's how it is for Tasha. For Tasha, it was very important to have her learn these things along the way so that in the here and now, she could have half a chance of beating Spawn. And I mean half. So we're going to see how it is, but we will get glimpses, we will get flashback glimpses into points in time in her life and how those points in time were part of her journey to the here and now to be capable of having a vendetta against Hellspawn, which is a pretty mean feat.
The way that this is basically built up is amazing. Now, when we're talking about an iconic character like Spawn, and better
Yes.
yet, the building of almost in the same reference, a iconic universe that is built through here, where we're talking about Spawn being around for close to 40 years, close to 40 years. Where does Spawn fit, not only in comic culture, but in Black comic culture?
You know, that's a great question because there's no simple answer to that. So that's two-part. Where Spawn fits in comic book culture is that Spawn is at the nucleus of Image Comics.
Yes.
Image Comics changed comics forever.
Mm-hmm.
You basically had 7 artists who did the thing that all of their peers likely considered foolish.
Mm-hmm.
They walked away from big money working on the most popular characters of the #1 publisher in direct market comics. They all walked away at the same time. Then they went to DC Comics and told them, we're not coming to you either. And then they launched the company, and the company's called Image Comics because it's about the art, right? And the art is the first thing that one experiences about comic books. You can have the best story, but if people don't like the art, unless you're an exceptional writer with an exceptional reputation, if they don't like the art, they're not getting to your narrative, right? So Spawn is at the nucleus of that. And again, Spawn was a very pure vision. With the other founders of Image, with the exception of, I think, Eric Larson and Savage Dragon, the other founders launched with universes. Rob Liefeld launched with, his universe. I think it was called the Extreme Universe. Jim Lee's was the Wildstorm universe. The Wildstorm universe encompassed Whilce Portacio's Wet Works. Jim Valentino had the Shadowhawk universe. But Spawn was Spawn. And I remember reading those early interviews with Todd McFarlane, and he said, I want Spawn to become a household name. That's why it was only the one book.
And he did
the core character. And he accomplished that. But he accomplished that in part with intention, right? If you dilute the character can't become a household name. So we wanted Spawn to become a household name. So Image Comics has changed comics. We don't have The Walking Dead without Image Comics. We don't have Invincible. We don't have other creator-owned companies that were inspired by Image Comics. We don't even have the Marvel Cinematic Universe in a way because Image Comics,
they crossed that bridge to go into movies themselves.
And you see, but also I feel like they inspired a certain kind of creative vision. I think Image Comics showed creators that you could be bolder with your ideas and you could be bolder with your thinking. And some of those creators actually took their bold thinking and they shared it with Marvel and DC. Marvel and DC were the beneficiaries of Image Comics, just like Image Comics was the beneficiary of Marvel Comics. So that's where Spawn is in comics culture. It's right at the nucleus. It's the latter decade of the 20th century, which shaped and continues to shape the 21st century of comics.
Right.
Now let's talk about where Spawn is in Black comics. It's really interesting. Spawn is both an icon because he's understood as a worldwide iconic hero who is Black, but he's also a character that does not outwardly reflect necessarily a Black experience.
Correct.
Right? His Black experience was connected to his family. So as long as he hoped to get his family back, he was still part of the experience. But once that was no longer part of what kept him going, his life no longer reflected that. And so Spawn is a paradox in that way. As far as I'm concerned, Spawn is black. He
Mm-hmm.
was born a black man. His life was shaped by that. His formidability is shaped by the fact that he was a black man in the latter half of the 20th century. It
Mm-hmm.
very much informs his. He has such a dogged determination. He will not give up. And when you talk about the black experience,
Yeah.
you're talking about the inability to give up, right? So Spawn's very much black as far as I'm concerned. And so that's where he is. He's there, he's acknowledged, he's respected, and there are different conversations about what is focal in his character,
Right.
right? But he is very much a product of the 20th century and being a black man during that time and having to thus be excellent at everything he did.
Yeah, it's almost to where I've seen a bunch of interviews myself, of course, with Todd McFarlane talking about the character of Spawn and better yet, even referencing his blackness. And also, it also begs the question of whether he's writing it with the intent that he is black.
Yeah, that's a good question. He is obviously the most qualified person
Of
to answer,
course.
but this is what I would say.
Mm-hmm.
When you're writing characters,
Mm-hmm.
the collection of the experiences make the character.
Yes.
Not every move the character makes, not everything the character says has to be a cultural indication.
Correct.
Not everything that we do in our lives is a cultural indication, right? It is an indication of the collection of our experiences
Mm-hmm.
in terms of what our personal ethos is, what our belief systems are, how we carry ourselves in this world. What is our capacity for selflessness versus our capacity for selfishness? What kind of psychological hurdles did we have to overcome? This is all part of the human experience, and different people from different communities have different paths.
Yeah.
So, but I look at him and I feel like Todd looks at him and says, I'm writing Al Simmons and all that that entails. I'm not looking at Al Simmons through one lens. I'm looking at who is the individual who was made of such fortitude that he was killed, sent to hell, turned into a weapon for hell against his will
Mm-hmm.
because he wanted his wife and daughter back, failed to get either of them back,
Yeah.
and then continues to go through this world and this war between heaven and hell to the point where the slave one day becomes the master.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that a fantasy?
Oh yeah.
Isn't that a goal that we can attribute to the Black experience? Isn't that Django Unchained,
That's the
right?
ultimate metaphor.
Exactly, right? Like the slave becomes the master, right? So the thing is, he's Spawn, he's Al Simmons, and everything that entails.
Yeah, and we're now looking at it now with the building of this universe. We're seeing Spawn reap the benefits.
100%. Yes, yes. Where he is in the hierarchy. But also, listen, you know how it is. The higher you go,
Oh yeah.
the harder it gets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Listen, what did the immortal notorious BIG say? More money, more
No
problems.
problems.
That is a metaphor for a lot of things. The higher you go, the harder it gets because there are people that are happy that you're there, and there are people that want to knock you off your throne and take it.
Correct.
Right? So Spawn is a being that is always on alert.
And better yet, you build a character that is meant to keep him on alert.
Listen, it it was something to really think about, right? Like to construct someone who's going to step to him,
Yeah.
right? And you've seen the first few pages online. So we start off and we show you like Spawn on the ground looking up and looking at her, right? So it's like, how'd Spawn get on the ground?
Yeah.
Right? That's a question. We're
Uh-huh.
going to answer it in time, but it's like, who got Spawn on his ass? That's a tough feat,
Yeah.
right?
A
So,
collective out of
yeah,
nowhere of something that would possibly throw you off your square,
yeah,
especially from somebody as powerful and as iconic as a character like that. You don't expect, especially in the first pages of that person's comic, to see Spawn laid out on his
yeah.
chest, looking up like, who hit me?
Listen. In you know, there are so many comics out there. On
Mhm.
any given Wednesday, depending upon do you have a local comic book shop, how big it is, there could be 200 new comics.
Yeah.
Okay. And I remember an old boss told me, you have the cover and you have the first 3 pages to get somebody because they see the cover, they're like, oh, that looks cool. What's that? And then they go, whoop, whoop, whoop. I'm in or I'm out.
Right. I gotta grab
They
your
see the
attention
first page,
immediately.
then they open, they got 2 and 3, right? And then they're like, okay, either I'm in or I'm gonna go buy Wolverine or I'm gonna go buy Batman, right?
Yeah.
So you gotta start it off hard and you gotta start it off letting the Spawn fans know, no, this is for real.
Mm.
This is for real in the Spawn universe, because there's your boy right there. Yeah. So
I
that's
hear
it.
you.
You gotta start off like you mean it, you
So
know?
how much would you say inspiration wise was Hellblazer
Oh,
adapted
listen.
to comics?
Oh my God. Yes, yes. John Constantine Hellblazer is a standard in comics.
Yes.
Just so we're clear. That's a standard, especially the original Vertigo run,
Hmm.
right? Like
Yeah.
I've got Hellblazer trades all over the place, and I'm a big fan of the earliest ones by Jamie Delano. I was reading Swamp Thing when Alan Moore introduced him in Swamp Thing, and you would have Jamie Delano, and I mean, you had that amazing long run by Garth Ennis, which is a standard in and of itself. And so Tim and I both really considered Hellblazer one of the North Stars. I think Tim has even written Hellblazer, so he has scratched that itch. 100% definite. Um, another inspiration for Tim, another inspiration was Grayson because
Oh,
he wrote
the Super
Grayson.
Spy series?
100%. He wrote that. He was the solo writer, and then I think he and Tom King were co-writers.
Mm.
So for him, that's a second inspiration that he's bringing to this. For me, I am a spy junkie, in terms of novels, in terms of the films and the TV shows, in terms of characters in comic books. Like I'm there for Shield.
Oh, you
Um,
seem like a Clancy guy.
listen, you better believe it, man. Listen, Without Remorse,
Hmm.
that's a great novel. That's a great book. You want to talk about character transformation? How you build a master spy? Tom Clancy's Without Remorse. Excellent book, right? The Spook Who Sat by the Door, Sam Greenlee, right? You're talking John Le Carre, right? You're talking Robert Ludlum, right? So that was part of what I brought to it. I brought my admiration for Hellblazer, like the Vertigo run of Hellblazer, but also like all the spy stuff. So
Mm.
when we're thinking about Tasha and how Tasha operates in this world, Tasha's a kind of person, she's not a hammer, she's a scalpel, yeah? So
Hmm.
when she rolls up on you, when you detect her,
Yeah.
like the knife has already gone across your throat. Like you're already dead once you've detected her. Unless she wants to make a point.
Right.
Now, if she just wants to make a point and show up, because that's another thing, right? Brutality is psychological warfare.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I go someplace and I leave a mess, people think to themselves, okay, do I want to mess with the person who left this
Did this?
carnage?
Yeah, it's a
Exactly. Did
yeah,
this.
yeah, it's
I
a
don't want to be I don't want to be part of this. I don't want to be part of the human vomit artwork
yeah.
3 days from now,
It,
right?
mhm.
So when brutality is necessary, she will use it, but usually she's the scalpel and not the hammer.
Yeah, it's the battle warfare of Vlad the Impaler, leaving everybody spiked above the battlegrounds, while the next set of people just tend to look and be like, I don't want that to be me.
Dude, that's the message.
Mm-hmm.
That is the message, right? So she's been doing that all over the globe. So
Mm-hmm.
the name of Bloodletter, like that name is known by people, but
Oh,
a lot of people haven't necessarily seen her. Yeah, but she's left bodies just like just like Al Simmons did,
hmm
right?
yeah,
Are we talking about an echo here? Let's find out. Let's find out if we're indeed talking about an echo, right? Because that happens too, right? Like trauma creates echoes.
absolutely. Now,
Yeah.
if I may,
Yes.
you have a new venture, with Illuminous as CEO. If you
Yes.
if you can, please tell us about this.
Okay, so we'll do. So, and thank you for asking. So, Illuminous started as a production company. And the first deal that I set up with that company was with 50 Cent's G Unit Film and Television to turn the comic book Zero into a film franchise. Zero was a comic book created and owned fully by Christopher Priest, right? It was illustrated by Criss Cross. And
Mhm.
then my partners in that venture, in addition to Christopher Priest, were Color Farm Media. Color Farm, the partners are Erica Alexander, who's a legend. I
Yeah,
don't have to run off Erica's resume,
don't.
but most recent accomplishments, obviously, American Fiction,
Mhm.
season 3 of Apple TV's Invasion, right? The Wu-Tang Clan saga on Hulu, right? Those are just her most recent. Listen, 93, very important year. We'll
Very
talk about
important.
that
Yeah.
in a minute,
Yes.
right? But
Canada
so
36.
that's her flexes and her partner, Ben Arnon, who really comes from the tech and crypto space. And so that was the first thing that Illuminous did. And, Zero is something that's still in conversation because Hollywood moves slowly,
It does.
especially a Hollywood that less than 2 years ago went through two major strikes, a Writers Guild strike and a Screen Actors Guild strike, right?
Mhm.
So Hollywood is an interesting place. If you think comics is wild, Hollywood is wild. But then this year I've launched the second component of Illuminous, which is called Illuminous Creative Services.
Yeah.
And that is where myself as an editor and a shaper of intellectual properties, someone who has worked on Batman, who has worked at Milestone, which gave the world Static Shock, who has worked at Heavy Metal, who is now working on Todd McFarlane's Spawn. That is me basically extending my purpose to the world and saying, I want to help creators, I want to help clients, and I want to help companies to develop their ideas into formidable intellectual properties, right?
Amazing.
Because it's it is so important that we have empowerment, right? Let me just lay out a few examples to you that have happened in less than a month.
Okay.
We lost Peter David.
Yes.
Peter David, a legend who has inspired many careers, one of the most prolific writers in comics in the last 35 years. The Hulk, Young Justice, Star Trek. That's only scratching the surface. Ideas that he have come up with are in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, are in the DC multimedia universe, are in video games, are in licensing. For the last few years of his life, he had medical difficulties to a degree where his wife had a GoFund campaign so that the community had to help pay for his medical expenses. He died less than a month ago. There's another GoFundMe because there were still expenses left over that the family has to pay for.
Yeah.
Think about that. Think about the fact that a few weeks ago, Electronic Arts, one of the biggest video game companies on the planet, totally dissolved their division, which was called Cliffhanger Games. All the employees of Cliffhanger Games scattered to the winds. What was one of the things Cliffhanger Games was working on? A Black Panther game.
Yeah.
People were working on that game for 2 and 3 years, scattered to the wind, right? And I say these things to you because these are the results of an absence of empowerment.
Yeah.
If you spend your life entirely working in service of another organization, if that organization has a profound mission and purpose to the world, I get it. The world needs organizations. The world cannot be a world of mavericks. There has to be some kind of cohesion. But if you're creative, I would say it behooves you to develop your ideas into formidable intellectual properties, because I think of intellectual properties the way I think of physical properties, the way you think of real estate. My wife and I own a home, right?
Yeah.
You buy a home, you put a lot of sweat and elbow grease into it.
You build equity.
You fix it up over time. You build equity. The home appreciates in value, right? And it's something that you can pass on to family, pass on to your kin, right? Intellectual properties are the same thing. Ask Ryan Coogler, who set up the Sinners deal so that the rights would revert to him in 25 years. Does he necessarily think he's going to be alive in 25 years? Not necessarily so, but family will be there.
Right.
The family will get the rights back. Then what you're talking about is generational wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And what I am doing with Luminous is there are so many people out there, entities out there, they don't know that this is possible. Just like the Access Guide to the Black comic book community. Mm-hmm. It's a gateway. So my company is representative of the purpose to empower creative people to develop intellectual properties. And I'm bringing my knowledge of working on one of the most popular intellectual properties on planet Earth, which is Batman. And working on Batman was a real lesson. I took some knocks because I was under the misconception that Batman was a character.
Mm-hmm.
Batman's an intellectual property. The character is the layer outside. But in back of that, Batman is a multi-billion-dollar franchise that is a specifically designed, maintained, and nurtured network of decisions and designs and rules and Bibles, and you disobey them at your peril, right? So I bring that knowledge to the people, right? And it's really a joy for me to be able to do that, because I started my career at Milestone. Now we're going to talk about 1993.
Yeah.
The year that Wu-Tang Clan launched into the world, the year that Milestone launched into the world. 1993 was a game-changing year across like entertainment and culture. And but here were these 4 Black men that came up and brought people together and built this truly multicultural, diverse superhero universe, the likes of which comics had never seen.
Mm-hmm.
And they owned it, right? In my younger years, I had worked for companies that were Black owned. My grandfather was a major investor in a business, and I worked at that business in my teenage years. So I knew about Black entrepreneurship,
Right.
but I did not ever imagine I would see it in the comic book space. But then when I saw it, it changed everything for me in terms of what I realized was possible. I was like, wow, this is a business. The capacity to own is possible. And then at that time, you had Brother Man, you had Ania, the Black Age of comics began. We had not seen anything like that in comics since the short lived all Negro comics in 1947, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing. Illuminous is about me paying it forward and helping creatives become entrepreneurs and helping them have an entrepreneurial mindset so that if they're working on a Black Panther game by day, by night, they're taking what they're learning from working on Black Panther and they're building their own thing. So that if they get kicked to the curb on the Black Panther job, now this is the job. Now the job is their thing, right? And they can take the lessons they learned and bring it to
Oh,
that.
for sure.
The spook who sat by the door. Take the lessons you learn from the institution, from the global complex, and take it back home, right? And build your own house and your own institution. That entrepreneurial spirit is no longer a luxury. It is a necessity right now. It's a necessity in comics. It's a necessity in entertainment. It's a necessity in this world right now. Empowerment, right? And we need to think that way. And so it's possible. It can be
Absolutely.
done. And so, you know, that's what's going on with Illuminous. And right now I'm working with some great clients and I'm certain there will be more. But to be here and do that, that's a purpose, you know, of this phase of my life and this phase of my career, and being able to continually write, whether it's Bloodletter for Todd McFarlane, whether it's the Shadow Cabinet that I did for Milestone, which is going to be out in trade paperback this August, whether it's looking back on the work that I did on Batman. I mean, when we relaunched the whole Batman line in the year 2000, that was a big thing. And this is 25 years later. This is the 25th anniversary of the Batman year 2000 relaunch. And those books are still being reprinted. They're very much part of the architecture
Yeah.
of Gotham City, right? You're seeing things manifest in shows like The Penguin, Zack Snyder's Justice League, and things like that. And so, you know, that's part of the whole package, right? And so to be able to have a career to do this, to have fun as a writer, and then to be able to pay it forward as an editor for, you know, clients and creators, you know, I dig it. I dig it. I'm happy to do it. And I'm basically continuing the mission that I learned from the Milestone founders. And at the core of that mission was entrepreneurship.
That's absolutely fantastic. Sir, I mean, I feel as though in the act of entrepreneurship, the world needs more people like you. So
But thank you.
I appreciate everything that you've basically put into the world of comics. I know that, you know, people, I've heard people call you a champion for the medium. And
Yes.
I see that full stride for exactly
Yes.
what it is. And
Thank you.
I truly mean that. I appreciate you allowing me the time to talk about Bloodletter for exactly what it is, the introduction of a world outside of the Spawn universe that nobody could have predicted, but only you could have put it forward.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You know, I'm really part of a good team. And listen, first of all, thank you. You're part of this ecosystem because you are helping to spread the word. You're in the places that we can't always be because we're
Oh,
at the table working. So thank you. You are part of this global community. And I do truly love the medium of comics. Comics, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the best inventions that we have given to ourselves as storytellers. And there are things that you can do in comics you can't do in any other medium. And the more we lean into that, the more that we'll really be able to unearth the true power of this storytelling format. The same way the best video games, the best films, what do? They really lean in to the qualities. I mean, look at Tom Cruise is now the prophet of cinema, right? It's like now you're finding out, oh, part of the reason this guy is such a perfectionist and was able to accomplish what he accomplished is because he loves and understands cinema.
Mm-hmm.
Truly an extraordinary student. And now he is spreading the gospel about it. So I hope with my career, I can continue to spread the gospel of comics.
Definitely, sir. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Partially one of the reasons that I started this particular podcast, which is now on episode 171 with this particular episode, was in the means of having consummate discussions about comic books, the creations of them, the stories behind them, and the people who create them. So I
Wow.
appreciate that 100%. Thank you, of course, for joining me. And I look forward to this book 100%.
You are welcome, and I look forward to hearing what you think. I want to hear from the readers. I love readers. I love collectors. I love readers more. Read, let us know what you think about it.
Absolutely. So for everybody here at the Facts Project, Joseph Illidge, James Grandmaster Facts Boys, go out and get Bloodletter June 18th, live in everybody's local comic book store for Image Comics. And for everybody here at the Facts Project, we are out.